Hi, I'm Mike.
And I'm Shane.
And this is NFGeeks. Alright, Shane, for this episode, and I've been wanting to do an episode like this for a while, but we're going to talk about philosophy because you were in my philosophy class last semester, so it's kind of fresh. And it would be fun to, and so we had all sorts of conversations already about philosophy in different places, but I think it would be fun to talk about it on NFGeeks because you now have a background in it, and it would be interesting to see an NF take on philosophy, especially between INFJ and ENFP. Now, before we get into that, there's something I've thought about with this that I want to have a raw reaction. This is why I haven't talked about this before with you, because you might find this very funny. So, before Christmas last year, 2012, I was involved in a flame war with a group called Podlair, and the reason was, and it's a long story, so the reason was I didn't find the merits of their group or ideas to be satisfying. And so that led to a war. Okay, think Helm's Deep. Okay. It was like
I'm picturing it.
Yeah. Da, 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 da. It was like that. And so they were very hostile to me. But I want to tell you the insult that I've always remembered. One of them said, I think it was a woman, one of them said that, because I was talking about Hegel and synthesis, and they weren't thinking about that. And so they said to me that I was a bad philosophy teacher and my students should get their money back.
Are you serious?
Yes, they really said that. I'll never forget that. Okay. That's the one comment I remember the most.
After I took your class, I was so into it, and we've talked about this before, how I was like really into it, and you didn't even realize I was so into it at the time.
Yeah.
And like all my friends, you know, they knew I was so into it because I talk about things like that all the time. I had a couple other friends that were like, okay, I'm gonna take philosophy now because it seems so cool, and they took it at UMass Dartmouth. And like the course would be called like Introduction to Philosophy, and then they'd be doing like truth tables and like stupid stuff like that.
Yeah, analytical philosophy.
And, like, yeah, and it would just be awful, and I'm like, you're not learning anything remotely that is awesome. So I feel really bad for you. So yeah, that's bullshit. You're a great philosophy professor.
Yeah, so. Thank you. That's wonderful. I realized that was just for my own self-promotion and amusement. I admit that totally. But Shane just had me, and actually, you were in class when that comment came to me.
Really?
Yes. So it was kind of mind blowing. I was like, wow. So all right. So thank you. I appreciate that. All right. So let's talk about philosophy. Okay. So you liked a lot of the things that you talked about, and so that we talked about. So let's start. What ideas really hit you even hard? You know, good or bad or whatever.
Well, like who would my favorite philosopher that?
Sure, it could be or any idea that we talked about that was
Well, I like Kant really. Kant's probably one of my favorites, to be honest.
Really, what made it? What about him?
The fact that, you know, like moral agency. I find that to be like really intriguing, cause like, I think I actually shared this instant with you in class. I don't know if you will remember, but I was on a trip to New York with the marching band, and we were talking about whether or not it was, you know, cool or the right thing to do to give like a homeless person money. And someone was arguing that, oh, they're just gonna go out and buy booze with it. You know what I mean? And to that, we had been talking about that in class like a few days before. So that was like fresh in my head, and I was like, well, that's not really like your call. You know what I mean? Your call is you're giving the homeless person money. They need money, and you're trying to do the right thing by giving them money. It's not really, you can't put it on yourself that they're gonna go out there and buy booze with it, or if they're gonna, you know, actually do something useful like buy clothes or something like that. You know what I mean? So that goes into like the moral agency. You have to be your own moral agent, whereas like you decide, okay, well, I'm gonna give this person money because that's the right thing that I can do. If they're gonna do whatever with it, that's their choice because they're their own moral agent. You know what I mean?
Oh, that's fantastic. For two reasons. One, Kant, and also let me say this: there's gonna be a bunch of pretentious jackasses are going to say it's Kant. Yeah, I know. But Kant would agree because if you're following a principle, the outcome is irrelevant. It's whether you follow the principle. And I'm going to predict maybe that your fellow peers on the bus thought that was ludicrous. Did you get any crap from this?
Yeah. Yes. Everyone was against me. It was one of those situations.
That's great. Back to the previous INFJ conundrum. You know.
Yeah. So I don't know. It's things like that, and it's like, people will be like, all right, well, if he's gonna go buy booze, then it's like you're causing him to get drunk. You know what I mean? But it's like you can't make that decision because first of all, how do you know for certain that he's gonna go out and get drunk?
Right.
You could.
That's knowing the noumenal.
Yeah, exactly.
Can't do that.
Can't do that.
But
so, it's I don't know. And everyone disagreed with me, and I feel like that's another thing going back to the INFJ thing where it's like sometimes I feel like people disagree with me just because it's like something people do. It's like, oh, time to disagree with Shane. Let's go.
Oh, that's wonderful. The other INFJs are gonna love this. Seriously, they're gonna love this. All right, and that's tough. Kant is tough to swallow. What were some things that we talked about that gave you angst or like tripped you up? And I say that because, as you know, I feel like my job as the teacher is to truth bomb you and really to leave you anxiety. I used to say that.
Yeah.
That you should leave frazzled. If you
leave
leave
you
the class,
succeeded too.
Oh, great! I used to say that if you leave you frazzled, then I did it right because that means that like I knocked you out of your comfortable space.
That class fell in like my third block like area for school, and then I'd have to be back in school for fourth block, and every time during fourth block I'd just be like so confused and like think about other stuff, and everyone would be like, "What's wrong with you?" I'm like, I need to figure out my life right now.
Oh, that's great. You're good.
So,
that's great.
Yeah.
What
something that gives me angst?
Oh, what's something in class that you like real like? Oh my God, what?
Machiavelli.
Really?
Yes.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. What about it?
All right. First of all, the fact that someone would even like suggest that is like absolute truth, that you need to, only be worrying about yourself and like basically stomp on everyone else, like that is so. Ugh, I hate that. Just disgusts me. And like, I don't know. Maybe it's because that like, that's like scary to me that even like people would think that that's how you have to live. You know what I mean?
Sure. That in order to, and people who are into Machiavellian thought would say that, well, it's justifiable because, you have to do what you got to do. Running things requires power, and to have power, you have to do things that you might not want to do, but that's for the greater good of power. All right, but you don't like that.
Yeah.
All right. So there's no place in your life where this applies.
Well, I don't know.
It may apply, but you wouldn't choose it.
When you were first describing it, it was like, yeah, I can definitely see how like people in power definitely stomp on other people, and that I feel like that is the problem with the world. You know what I mean? That's not the solution.
Very idealistic.
It's like, all right. For example, we talked about in the episode about me being too judgmental, where it's like basically I would destroy my own image by telling people, what's wrong with their lives and like trying to help them. And so I feel like that's doing the opposite. Like I'm basically stomping on myself by being an asshole, but because I'm trying to help people, you know what I mean? So it's like I'm raising everyone else up, trying to help them while I'm stomping on myself. And I feel like that is a way better way to live your life than to stomp on other people to make yourself better.
Yeah, I don't know if I talked about this in class, but you know what? Maybe I should now with Machiavelli, but there's a guy from the 60s, I think he's dead now. He must be like 100 and something, called Robert Greenleaf, and he wrote a very short essay entitled Servant Leadership, which says that to be a leader is actually to be a servant of the people you're leading, almost like a butler. You know what I mean? Or a shepherd, where you're like, that's in Christianity. You don't want to be like a Machiavellian. You want to be the exact opposite of that, and serve your community, and always think about how can I serve them. Just like a servant, like you're literally a servant, and that's what a leader is, service. Does that connect with what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean that sounds pretty intriguing. I should take a look at that because it sounds like something that I would definitely agree with.
Yeah, Robert Greenleaf. I think it's Greenleaf. But anyway, it's called servant leadership. If you Google servant leadership, you're going to get right there. All right. What else? What other things in philosophy that you liked, disliked, got you going?
Nietzsche.
Oh, yeah, everyone has something to say about Nietzsche. All right, what do you, yeah, I think you had a problem. I think you were, like, leaving a little, I think that was an angst day. I kind of have a weird memory now. What do you want to say about Nietzsche?
Maybe with Nietzsche, it's more of, like, I can see, like, partial bits of truth within, like, what Nietzsche is saying that, like, and I don't want to accept that as what it is because, like Machiavelli, I think it's kind of like a really, like, dismal look on the world.
Yeah, actually,
you know what I mean?
when I teach ethics, I put Machiavelli and Nietzsche together as one because it's about power and empowerment.
Yeah, I feel like there are a lot of, things that are similar between them. You know what I mean? Like, where, like, being the prince in Machiavelli would kind of be like being the overman in Nietzsche. You know what I mean? There's definitely similarities between the prince and the overman, I feel like. And I feel like being, the prince or the overman, as I just said about Machiavelli, isn't the way to live. You know what I mean?
Nietzsche is more about empowerment, though. And what's so bad about that empowerment for you? I mean, I could say because I talked about it in class too.
First of all, I feel like the whole, like, base idea of existentialism is basically that there's no, like, truth or, like, major force in the universe, you know what I mean? And I feel like that is completely false. Like, I think truth and, like, goodness is so solid, and, like, you can't say that doesn't exist. Like, truth does exist. Love exists, you know what I mean? Like,
right, so one of the things, and I want to admit that I've been trolling you on it, is the issue of nihilism. And because that is inherent in Nietzsche and in a lot of others that come off of Nietzsche and existentialism or whatever, that there is, the belief in nothing, that there is no foundational truth and, and anything goes. That seems to be the opposite of what you're saying. What is difficult for you in that?
Well, it's like, how can I put this? Well, first, we talked about in the other episode how, like, INFJs always think they're right or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
Not even think. We are always right. But
sure.
So, obviously, there's some thing that is right, you know what I mean? So, you can't say that reality is a lie, you know what I mean? And, like, perception is the only reality, because then anything could be true. Like, if I perceived you
that's actually the point,
If I perceived you as a giant bunny, then you're a giant bunny. But
what's so bad about being a giant bunny?
You're not a goddamn giant bunny, Mike. That's what the problem
all right,
is.
but what they would say, this is exactly what they'd say, is that reality is constructed and based on meaning, and that giant bunny has no foundational truth as a, it's just a word, and giant bunny can mean anything. Giant bunny can mean me.
All right. What does blow my mind, though, is
I'm not saying I believe that. I'm just sort of...
yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Is the idea that, like, I'm sure you've heard things about this before, and if you haven't, then we can talk about it. Like, my colors could be seen differently than yours. Like, I could look
that's an old thing, yeah.
Your shirt and be like, that's black, but the way I see it is, it's actually your yellow, you know what I mean? My yellow is the same color as your black, you know what I mean?
Oh, sure, the question of perception.
Yeah.
Is perception universal?
So
even if we say it is.
The fact that we can't come to a conclusion as to, like, if we're all seeing the same color, that kind of blows my mind a little bit, and, so, but, I don't know, I think that, the fact that that's even, like, a discussion maybe could allude to the fact that, existentialism does have some kind of groundwork, but I don't think that we necessarily do see different colors and things like that. I think that there are underlying currents that, control the universe. Like, for example, we talked about in the other episode how, like, the world is the universe is logical. Basically, if I do something bad, it's gonna come back to bite me in the ass.
Right. It's a self-correcting mechanism. That's Taoism. I like Taoism as a philosophy.
Yeah.
So.
And I feel like that. I definitely see that. Like, I observe things like that all the time, and it can't just be, random, which would be the existentialist point of view. Whereas, like, things
or absurd. They would say it's absurd and
like,
unknowable.
Yeah. Anything's, like, chaotic. You know what I mean? Like, I don't see that. I see this happens and this happens. You know what I mean? That's my reality.
Haha. All right. So we only have a little bit of time left. What last word would you have to like to say about philosophy, or any particular idea that
Nietzsche and Machiavelli are wrong.
They're from an INFJ, so it must be. It's funny. Sometimes I go back and forth on Nietzsche. Is he an INFJ or an INTJ?
I heard INFJ.
Really?
Yeah.
I kind of think he's an INFJ sometimes because I could see an INFJ having that mustache.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Real stylish giant. But I don't know. And he's very poetic
Yeah.
in his writings. So.
I could see INTJ though.
Yeah, me too. That's the tough part.
Yeah, every INTJ I know seems to like completely agree with him. So.
Yeah, they love him.
Maybe there's something
I've seen
to
that
do
too. Well, we'll never. Well, you know, there's lots of opinions about Nietzsche and whether he is an I and an N and a J though. We got that down.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Great. Thanks, Shane.
Yep.